Welcome to the NCO Journal Podcast, where we explore NCO professional development. This is a podcast series where we discuss published articles with authors and provide a forum for the open exchange of ideas, information, and solutions. I'm your host, Chago Zapata, Managing Editor of the NCO Journal. With us is Sergeant First Class Osvaldo Aquite, NCOSE of the NCO Journal, and Staff Sergeant Brandon Cox, Senior Editor. Today we discuss the article 10 Things with incoming Command Sergeant Major David Vowell, 26th Cavalry 25th Combat Aviation Brigade, and Captain Ethan Carmack, Deputy Support Operations Officer, 82nd Combat Aviation Brigade. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us. Sergeant Major, could you please tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, good morning, gentlemen. Thanks for having me on the podcast this morning. So my name's Command Sergeant Major David Vowell. I've been in the Army for 22 years. I'm a Black Hawk mechanic and crew chief by trade, 15 Tango. I have 4 kids. I just recently completed a PCS to Hawaii, coming from the 82nd, and I've pretty much been stationed in almost, across all the major divisions from, Alaska and Fort Bliss, Fort Campbell, 82nd at Fort Liberty, and then now I'm coming in. I'm the incoming Command Sergeant Major, getting ready to take over a 26th Cavalry in the 25th Combat Aviation Brigade here in Hawaii.
Thanks, Sergeant Major. So it's called 10 Things, and I know that you initially started out as 5 things. Tell us how it evolved into this 10 things you wish you knew.
This was a project that started out with 5 things. It was a writing prompt that Sergeant Cox had given to me. Kind of more of like a challenge just from our previous conversations, and I couldn't. Basically, I just got into the zone of writing and talking about it, and it just morphed into 5. It's at the end, I kind of morphed into 10. I kind of joked about it at the end of the article, but I talked to a lot of people too. I just wanted to get other people's opinion before I kind of formulated mine. I didn't want to jump into, what I thought I should know when I was a sergeant. But what it started from was, if you were shaking someone's hand and they just got promoted to sergeant and you had just a few seconds, you were, waiting in line to shake their hand to congratulate them for becoming an NCO, what's something that you would tell them, right? And that's where the bolded, comments came from of this is the thing I'm going to say to this person very quickly. And then just kind of an explanation behind it.
So I'm curious, what is that one thing, Sergeant Major, that you now tell people when they first get promoted to E5?
It's different, I think, now for me as a Command Sergeant Major. So not to give you that challenging answer or to not answer your question, right. I get the opportunity to have more time with people because I can say, come to my office and have a talk with me, right? Sure. I'm not just at that ceremony just to shake their hand and say that one thing. As a NCO, corps, right? We all stand there for each other. If I was a sergeant and if it was someone I didn't know that well and it was just that one thing, and funny that you say it, because when I got promoted to sergeant, there was a staff sergeant that gave me advice, and I think it's number 8 on my list, but it's the really first piece of advice I got, and he said, pick and choose your battles, and basically not every hill is worth dying on, and that's really all he said to me. And I think it took me, probably 15 years to understand what that really meant. Not everything is, sometimes it's okay to grin and bear it or just to get things done. But, pick and choose your battles, because there's just some things out there that deserve more of your time and effort. Not everything is going to get 100% of your attention.
Now going into the first one, let's kind of go down the line. We'll pick up on number 8 a little bit later here, but let's talk about it's okay to make mistakes. Is there a specific story or a specific reason why you picked that? Why you say that? I mean, what's the story behind that?
I think that's just in general. Everyone's me. I mean, and anybody else can chime into this too, but terrified of making a mistake, because you have to, in today's day and age, on an NCOER, you have, most qualified, highly qualified, not qualified, and everyone's terrified that they're not going to get most qualified, or, qualified means you're a bad person somehow, some way, and I don't agree with that, but it's kind of, if you make one mistake, it's almost the culture in some organizations is that one mistake is unrecoverable from, and so you just have to put up a fake, persona that you're a perfect person all the time, and I don't think it's okay to perpetuate that type of behavior, especially as a leader. And it's okay to let people know that they can make a mistake, because then they're just not trying. And it's important to note that I'm not really talking about, getting a DUI, right? Or treating soldiers badly. That's not the mistakes I'm talking about. It's actually trying to getting out there, getting stuff done and doing it wrong, and, basically trying to do things the way you're supposed to do, but making a mistake along the way to doing it right. It's okay to try new things and do things, that you're not used to doing. Don't be afraid, if that makes sense.
Yeah, we see this a lot with younger NCOs, right, or newly promoted NCOs, that they're so afraid of making a mistake or that it's kind of stifles initiative. It prevents people from taking action at some point, and that's kind of even worse than trying something and maybe just moving along from it and learning or making mistakes or adjusting. So I found that's a very interesting one. It's very on point for young NCOs.
It kind of takes me back to Sergeant Major. I was in the Marine Corps, so my experience is a little bit different than y'all's, but it's a lot of things are right there, But I remember when I was with the 11th Marine Expeditionary Unit, the colonel put the young soldiers, young Marines, in my case, young Marines in charge. So there was a young Lance Corporal in charge of each section, S1, S2, S3, all of them down the line. And I thought that was interesting, because they were allowed to run the section and make the mistakes they needed to make, and they got a chance to learn from them. So I think it's important that NCOs, that soldiers in general, know that making a mistake, that it's okay to make mistakes, but the important thing is you learn from them and you don't repeat them. So, Captain, you got anything you can chime in on this? On number one on the list?
Yeah, hey, my name is Captain Carmack. I didn't think I got the chance to introduce myself.
No.
My name is Captain Carmack. I'm over at 122 ASB over at the ASEC camp. I got the last year of being able to work with Command Sergeant Major Vowell. He was my right-hand man here in the shop, and I'm really glad you guys invited me, and he invited me to join this piece, and I got the opportunity to read his article. I personally love 7 and 8, but I'm glad we're going all the way down the list. Number one, it's okay to make mistakes. I think, especially from the officer side of the house, being able to let your NCOs know, because a lot of times, like, hey, if you're a company commander or if you're an officer, you're going to be that senior raider on an eval. And they feel like, oh shoot, I made a mistake in front of my senior raider. I made a mistake in front of my raider. Now it's definitely going down the path that I don't want to go down. But I think it's, as officers, we can set that expectation to say, hey, junior NCOs, especially if we're talking about junior NCOs in this one, hey, if we're out there training, I want you to make the mistakes now so that you don't make those mistakes later. And then empower those soldiers to say, hey, make mistakes now, because, ultimately we'll learn from those mistakes and continue to, better ourselves and better the organization as a whole.
Yeah, and if we direct anything to senior leaders, I guess it would be, assume that risk and allow your junior NCOs or junior leaders to take a chance and try something new.
Let's move on to number 2 here. Let's talk about the need for balance.
Yeah, so it's pretty important. Most of us can talk to soldiers every single day that don't have balance, and I think there's a certain time. I don't know when it is. It's different for every person, where you kind of start caring more about the unit than you do your soldiers, or yourself or your family. And no one wants to admit that, but if you go to any office building, after 1700 and the only cars in the parking lot, they're probably like the majors, right? The S3s, the XOs, and then every once in a while you'll see a staff sergeant or a sergeant's car there. And if you can find where that person is working, they're probably doing something that can wait till the next day. I didn't learn balance until maybe 2 or 3 years ago. And so like I said, I had 4 kids, but I'm not married, right? I ended up with a divorce after 17 years. I'm not blaming that on the Army. It's my fault. I own it. But there was many times where I put the Army before my relationship, before my family. And there came a time where, that relationship had to end and we both had to move on. And that was a learning lesson for me. And I let the Army kind of dictate and control, basically my entire life. And so I've been in the Army since I was 17. I've never really had a real job interview. I don't know what life is like outside of the Army. And so if someone, before I got, married, I was in the Army even, right? So for 3 years. And so, kind of tell people like I was married to the Army before I was married to my previous spouse. And in the article, I talk about, how the Army will eat you up. And that's kind of, if you're totally committed, to the success of yourself and your soldiers and the Army, you will break down, right? Without any other balance, without any other taking time for yourself, for your self-development, for the development of your family and spending time with those that you love, it will take a toll. And I just know that, from firsthand experience, unfortunately. And it doesn't have to be just a divorce or a break in marriage. It can be other things too. But I know now, right, that it's important for, I have a fiance that PCS'd with me basically here to Hawaii. And, she comes to all these unit events that we've had, the newcomers brief and the, there's a family day we're doing at the gunnery on Saturday, and she's going to come out there with me. And it's important for young soldiers, I think, to see that like a healthy relationship. And I fully intend for when a first sergeant wants to see me at 1700, weighing the pros and cons of what they want to see me for. If I have a time set up where I'm going to do something with my fiance, I'm going to let them know, like, hey, I have this previous engagement, with Bree, my fiance, and let them know that that's important to me. And I also want to kind of lead from the front in that aspect as well, to basically deliberately let them know that I want them to go to their child's soccer practice, or I want them to go, take some time because they're, take some time and, this is all soldiers and NCOs, but take some time and help your wife get ready for that job interview, or your husband, get ready for whatever event. Bring your family in. Just that balance between the Army and your personal life, it will get out of skew really fast just because you're trying to do a good job, and it's so hard to recover from. I mean, I had to do a whole reset on my whole life basically to recover, and and that's going to affect me and my kids for the rest of my life, and and theirs. And so that's knowing that now and being able to talk about it openly and be transparent that, like, I'm a human being and I have feelings and sometimes I need to take time for myself. It's very important, and that it shouldn't just be a command sergeant major, right, that has the opportunity to do that. And it's a message that I want to spread and make sure that most soldiers, or all soldiers, know that the way that you communicate your needs to be able to take care of yourself will truly impact like your development as a human being and as a person.
Yeah. And nobody's irreplaceable too. So that means, if you need to take some time to be with your family and stuff, there's somebody that can always step in to cover for you. Nobody's irreplaceable. This giant machine that's the Army, like the mortal engines, is going to keep going regardless. So, that everybody needs to find that time for balance.
We talked about empowerment a little bit already, but maybe we can focus on the second part of that third, which is follow-up.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite ones. There's a soldier I worked with in our SASMO shop at 82nd that he didn't believe in Captain Carmack. What was it that he said that he didn't believe when you say I think it was trust but verify? He thought that was like an infringement upon his rights as a human being, right? Basically trust but verify meant that you didn't trust someone, right? And so whatever, right? Just stop using that term, right? And all it means is follow up. Give them a task. Basically, trust but verify to a lot of soldiers means micromanagement, right? And we all know micromanagement's a terrible term. Can't use it. Even though I personally believe there is probably a time for that when someone needs like really deep mentorship or coaching. But either way, the follow up is what's basically, it does like multiple things. Not only it shows them that you have a vested interest in what it is that they're doing, right? And that doesn't mean that you go in and yell at them, right? And because they're doing it wrong, you're asking questions, and you gave them a task that you trusted them to do, and then whether depending on the task, it could be 30 minutes or a week or whenever. It's that follow up that shows them that you still care, that task is important. And a method that I like to use is I like to follow up in the beginning. And so I know it sounds weird, but basically, hey, Sergeant Cox, I want, this soldier had this infraction, whatever it is. And, I need you to, make sure we do a 4856 and, just basically come back in my office on Friday and talk to me and let me know how it goes. Right. I'm not telling him how to do the counseling. I'm just, letting him know that counseling needs to be done. But, I'm also saying, like, right from the beginning, like, you're going to come see me and then you're going to follow up and you're going to tell me this whole story about how this counseling went down. And that could be, truck maintenance or training someone on a soldier, a common task, whatever that needs to be. But it's not just firing and forgetting. We all love soldiers that you can fire and forget, go get this task done. You never have to follow up and it's done. But how many of those soldiers actually exist? And how many of those soldiers actually complete those tasks within the left and right limits of ethics, right? Of legal, moral, and ethics, right? And so those are few and far between. And so following up is empowerment, I think, without micromanagement.
You know what? You bring up a good point, Sergeant Major, because some of those fire and forget NCOs, they also don't learn as much as the ones that do get the follow up, right? I remember somebody giving me a lot of tasks to do, and they would just let me and trust me to do it. But then through that process, I'm not learning, hey, am I doing this right? Am I supposed to be, is it this easy? You know what I mean? So I think follow-up is important, and it's probably even more important for some of those NCOs that are kind of a fire and forget.
But doesn't this all also lead back to your first point, too, that it's okay to make mistakes? And this is where you make them, where an NCO who follows up will see that you may make mistakes, and then he'll counsel you, mentor you, and show you how it's done. And now it's not affecting, the mission.
So I think the difference with that lies within the leader, right? So how are they following up? Are they following up through that micromanagement, which people deem so terribly, right? I hate micromanagement too, but I only ever felt micromanaged by bad leaders. If someone was following up with me consistently and giving me advice or even helping me with the task to try and make me better, but did it in a way that was compassionate, then that wasn't micromanagement. That was actually following up with a leader who cared.
They want to develop you. You felt like you were being cared for.
Exactly.
And you know what? Maybe when you're inexperienced or maybe when you're a young NCO, you think, man, they're probably just doing this because I'm young, because I'm just newly promoted. Yeah. But maybe the captain here can give us an example. Is this something that happens at those higher ranks with officers as well?
Yeah, I think for sure. I think it's more so, hey, you want to empower the soldier, you want to empower that higher ranking officer or senior NCO. But I think a lot of the times that if you empower them the correct way and not say, hey, I need you to do this, or just how we go about empowering people, they honestly end up following up with you and end up, if they care about the task and that you care about the task that you set forth for them, they end up back briefing you. I think here in the shop, honestly, I think one thing that Sergeant Major and I tried to get a lot of, because when you work at, on a brigade staff, you have a lot of senior NCOs, senior officers that, hey, I need you to execute X task, or hey, battalion XO, I need you to do this for whatever reason, or there's a million rabbit holes. But at the end of the day, if they come back to you and they back brief you, I think that relationship has been is something that you can continue to grow. You got constantly people saying, hey, I need this, I need this, I need this. Everybody needs things in the Army. And back up to the top to number 2, it'll consume you. If you don't have that balance and you don't empower correctly, eventually people start to shut down and it becomes too much. So I think people end up following up with you.
I'd like to refer this to the command sergeant major here, how it refers to or how you would tell it to a young corporal or a young sergeant, somebody who just became an NCO. How would you give them this advice in that short little nibble of information?
Right. So I think that it goes down to counseling, honestly. That's probably the best way for a sergeant to empower and follow up a soldier, developmental counseling. And we do that on a monthly basis, and that's a way for them to actually track and record and follow up on things that they assigned a soldier to do. So it goes more than just those basic tasks. Do you need me to take you to the education center so we can learn about how to enroll in college? Or, do you want to go with me to the autocraft center and take the class together so we can both get our cards to learn how to do oil changes or whatever life skills that are required? Because it's still, as much as people don't want to do it, there's a lot of young soldiers that look to their NCO in a very fatherly way. And it's people don't, I've heard that before, like, oh, I'm not this person's dad. And that's true. Or mom, for instance, but that counseling is the way to get after the empowering young soldiers, to get after it and to get after trying to be the next rank, and then proper, follow up throughout that month.
That kind of leads us to the next point, which is getting as commitments versus compliance, right? When you do that follow up, you demonstrate that empathy, that care. You're kind of getting commitment instead of just compliance, and maybe talk a little bit about that.
Right. So that was we talked about that a lot when I was at the Sergeant Major Academy. It seemed like every course we took that it always came up, and a lot of senior leaders coined that phrase. And there's I guess it's a WhatsApp group, a leadership development group that has a few hundred people in it, and what spawned off of that was kind of like a book club, and they picked the 3-meter zone by retired, Command Sergeant Major J.D. Pendry, and he had a whole section in there about commitment versus compliance. So I felt that was important to add in there because I was hearing it from, multiple different, directions. And, most soldiers will do things because you tell them to, right? Most, and depending who you are. I think the senior you get, when you give someone a direct task, the more senior you get, there's kind of the risk goes up on whether or not they actually do it or not. I just say that because I know of Sergeant First Classes that I've worked with in the past that are bold enough to not do what they're told, and so that's a lack of compliance, and a lack of commitment at the same time. But for a young soldier, a sergeant working with the young soldier, we want soldiers to do things because because they want to, not because they're told to. And I forget the movie, but it was, I want you to do the dishes, and the guy was like, why would I want to do the dishes? And that's the commitment versus compliance. The quality of work is much higher for people. The quality of work inside of an organization is much higher when the people that are in it are committed versus just trying to get the job done because they're trying to leave by a certain time, right? And so quality over quantity, and you're not going to get the commitment without the trust, right? And all these points tie together, and you can sprinkle a little bit of into there, but you can't have commitment without trust. And you can get compliance just by the rank that you wear on your chest most of the time, especially with young soldiers. But for a young sergeant trying to get commitment from a brand new soldier, I think is relatively simple, and that's just by doing the right thing and being there for that soldier and training them and sponsoring them and bringing them into the fold and being a part of their life, being committed to them. And basically that young soldier will just follow in the footsteps of that sergeant, and not because they're a sergeant, right? Everyone understands the relative authority, the relative definition of authority that NCOs have, but you don't want to get looked at with contempt, And I was that guy. I was a sergeant that yelled at everybody because I just thought that was, I didn't think anything. That was my best way of dealing with things. And yelling is not the way, It doesn't, I think it is sometimes, but it's not all the time. And, you can learn a way to get your soldiers to follow you that's legal, ethical, and moral, and they're following you because of you, right? Like, not because you're a sergeant, but because of what you stand for and who you are, and you represent, the standing intent of the organization. You represent, you follow the commander's vision, and you understand what that is, and you understand the role of the organization. If the soldiers are committed to you, they're going to be committed to the unit, and that just naturally increases, the quality of the organization's output.
And it probably starts with uncrossing your arms and taking your hands off your hips. Captain Cormac, when you read that, what did you take away from that?
When you're looking at like how you present yourself in a room, right? If you're the person that nobody wants to talk to, you might be the smartest person in the room, right? But if you're the person that nobody wants to talk to, you're not helping out the organization at all. I think, especially when we're talking about leaders and where junior NCOs, junior officers can then go and approach. I think it comes down to being approachable. If you're not an approachable person, I don't think you're going to be able to get to know your organization, get to know the soldiers, NCOs, officers within your formation. They're not going to want to come to talk to you about, their family life. They're not going to want to come and talk to you about how to progress, in their civilian education, their military education. And, ultimately, I think that impacts any organization that you're a part of at all levels.
In the very situation I'm in right now, I'm doing left seat, right seat ride, moving into a new position as a command sergeant major. So everybody's new to me, and I'm just doing my best to and I'm true and I'm honest when I meet someone. I'm trying to shake everybody's hand, and and I say things like, it's good to meet you, because it is, and they're part of our team, and we expect a lot out of them. And so, and I've corrected soldiers in my organization that have said, sorry to bother you, Sergeant Major, or, and like, no, like, you're not ever, bothering me. And it's like, if anything, I don't want to bother them because of how much they do, way more work than I do, and like physical labor, right? And so they're doing the preponderance of the work in the organization. And so I don't want to stop them from doing that. And that's the whole uncross your arms and take your hands off your hips. It just means be able to, to be able to talk to you. There's I think it was General Funk on his commanding general picture with a giant smile on his face. Combine that with like the last few weeks I was at Fort Liberty. I walked into my ammo section's office to talk to an NCO, and that NCO, the very first thing that they said was, "What's wrong?" And it just felt horrible because there was nothing wrong. That was just my resting face. And so, I had to convince that person that there was nothing wrong with me. And, when if I would have just changed my facial expression, like purposefully, to let them know, and I needed nothing from that interaction. I was actually going to check on them. And so that's, don't need to have soldiers not want to talk to you or approach you because you just look grumpy, and I think it was a TikTok or a Facebook reel or something. Some person, I wish I had a better reference, but they actually found General Funk on the street, and one of those ones where it was a quick video, and they were like, you look, he was wearing a suit, I think, and they're like, "What do you do for a living?" And he's like, "I'm a retired Army general," and anyways, he was in civilian clothes, and like that person, giant smile on his face and command photos, and then on the street, right, completely approachable by just a random civilian trying to do a random social media video, and that just goes a long way when you're approachable, and it ties right back to the trust and empowerment and everything else, because people want to talk to you. If people don't want to talk to you, then why are you even a leader? I don't want to talk with like contempt in my voice about it. I just, when I see leaders with their arms crossed, right, or standing, like basically standing in front of a bunch of soldiers with their hands in their hips, and I do it too. I catch myself doing it all the time. It's a bad habit. What do you do with your hands? And can't put them in your pocket, Captain Carmack. And so
confirm nor deny these accusations.
Yeah, and so it's just one of those things. But when you look at yourself in a full body mirror and just compare yourself to crossing your arms, having your hands on your hips, or even, just standing there with your fingers interlocked, just kind of at your waist, with your arms crossed, as a senior NCO looks pretty imposing. Some more than others, but it's. I want the soldiers in my organization to be able to talk to me, and I don't want that behavior to basically to get out of hand. Where specialists can't talk to their sergeant because they feel unapproachable. And so, put a smile on your face. Be happy to be there. Be happy to know the people that are there and thank them every day. And it's just important, and not everything has to be bad. And it's hard sometimes, but it's important to show that you want to be there.
I think also that I think young NCOs early on in their career, they think that they need to be aggressive, dominant. They have to impose their will on on their soldiers. And that's the thing, is that that's why it's important that I think NCOs at all levels, they have to lead by example. So if you have a sour face, arms crossed, it could be just like your resting Grinch face, as Sergeant Nikita just said.
Well, it's the holidays,
Your resting Grinch face. But that's the thing. If you're doing all the things, you're empowering your soldiers, you're following up, you're showing them how things are supposed to be. They're gonna see you and see you more as somebody who has their arms open because of the things that you've done and how you've demonstrated and how you.
They won't even see you as a sergeant; they'll see you as a role model.
Yeah. If you're the right role model and somebody who's not micromanaging, doing all these other things that we talked about. I think ultimately, though, is that you want to be open for your NCOs or for your soldiers. You want to be approachable. You want to be a leader, which is everything that we're talking about. Is if you're a good leader, if you're a leader at all, then those kind of things might not be that much of a detriment.
Start with being a good person.
There you go. Yeah.
And just care.
So you talk a little bit too about struggling with staying relevant. It says you regularly attend meetings where your team challenges your technical competence. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, maybe a little story about when that happened.
Yeah.
That happens every day. I'm a Black Hawk crew chief, right? And so now, I'm in an Apache organization. So I spent, you see it with NCOs, right? Where they go be a drill sergeant or a recruiter or an instructor. Instructors don't have it too bad, I think, because they're instructing, doctrine from their field. But, and drill sergeants will always stay in touch with basic, common tasks, but they lose MOS competency. But recruiters, they lose both because it's not about, technical competence at all. And so, and now, like, once you reach a certain level and your MOS combines with others, so like I'm not a 15 Tango anymore, I'm a 15 Zulu. And so I don't get to my technical competence that I excelled at when I was a staff sergeant. It's not completely irrelevant in an Apache organization, but I can't apply it 100%. And so it's important to ask questions. It's important to get in the books and read the doctrine. That's what I've been doing in this transition time for me. Is I'm reading aviation doctrine about how a cavalry regiment fights its fight, and that's what I have to do at my level. I can understand, air transport operations and how to deploy, in an expeditionary environment and our different metal tasks. You don't want to be the person that doesn't know what they're talking about. Or you go, it's always meetings, or a field environment, or you ask someone a question and they say, I don't know, or I got to get back to you. And that's just showing that you're not relevant. Why are you in a meeting if you don't know like basic information, especially like when your peers or people that are performing the same duties as you have those answers. And, that goes, if you can't, play the part, then people will stop talking to you, and they will not trust you. NCOs are supposed to be technically and tactically proficient, and so you have to work at it, and that's where it comes from, reading doctrine, and no one likes reading doctrine except for my old boss, Major Weathers. He used to write doctrine for a living, and he works at 82nd, and shout out to Major Weathers. But there's nobody likes doing that, but that's you don't get better by doing things that you like to do most of the time, and so you have to make a conscious effort to stay relevant for whatever that means for you. And for me, especially at this stage, it's asking questions and getting involved and learning, opening my ears and letting people teach me, so I stay relevant, to what's happening in my organization.
Yeah, and when you stay relevant, then you become confident, right? And so, if anybody's out there struggling with confidence or struggling with, being that, having that presence, right? Met the standard kind of NCO on presence. The best way to become confident is probably, which is the next point, coincidentally, is by staying relevant. What do you think, Chago?
No, I think it's important to be confident, but I think we should hear from the Sergeant Major about this. Better yet, you know what? Let's start with Captain Carmack.
Yeah, you're talking about the number 7 confidence, correct?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I think how you carry yourself will largely dictate the ultimate outcome. I think a lot of times, if you're confident in your decision making, you're confident in your ability to carry out tasks or take care of soldiers, or I was asked a long time ago when I was getting ready to get selected to go to I was getting ready to get selected to OCS, had to sit in on a board, and I was a civilian at the time, so I'd never done anything in the Army. So went in this board, and there's all these high-ranking officers who I thought were at the time, and they're asking me all these questions, and then they asked me a fairly challenging question. I won't call the specifics of it, but they asked me the question, and then they asked me, well, are you sure about that? And I said, and I kind of changed my answer, and then they're like, so you're not sure about that? And, they ultimately, expressed to me, they said, hey, no matter what decision you make, be confident in that decision and stick to it. Because, if you aren't going into that situation confident, then you shouldn't be entering that situation at all. Right. I think that's kind of where I want to leave it. It's just expressing that confidence in yourself, and then expressing that confidence in your subordinates. If you don't enable them to be confident in their tasks, I think you as the leader need to better reorganize yourself. Look internally first, always. What do you think?
No, I totally agree, sir. Besides the story that's in the article, because the story that's in the article, hits home for me. But 2 instances, we, division run yesterday for the 25th. It's Tropic Lightning Week this week, so naturally we're doing a division run, and having trouble finding people to sing cadence while we're out there running, and I just started grabbing people out of the formation. And I'm not the CSM yet, right? We're fortunate where we have two CSMs here, but I just started grabbing people and sending them out there to sing cadence, and I don't know how many people. Oh, I can't do that, and I'm like, hey man, just left, right, left. That's all you gotta do. Just keep them in step. Someone yell something, 1, 2, 3, 4, and get out there. And every single person that I did that to, they came up with one cadence. It might have been a tenth of a mile or whatever, but they left, right for a little bit, and then they came up with a few verses, and then they said, that's all I got. And I was like, well, that's all I asked for. I didn't even ask for that. You did way more. Great job. Get back in formation. And that's just confidence. And maybe next time they won't, need someone like me to kind of push them out, and to help out and sing some cadence, because that's hard. It's a hard thing to do. I think that we were a lot better at it, 20 years ago than what we are today. And I'll sing cadence. I'm terrible at it, but I get out there and I do my best, which is all I ask anybody to do. And the second funny thing about confidence is, a few years ago I was like in a waiting. I was getting, I went to the Audie Murphy board, and sweating and terrified before I walked in there, and the brigade one of the brigade CSMs that knew me, and he sat on the board, and he was walking through to go find his place at the table, and he said, Sir Vowell, why are you worried? And I'm like, what do you mean? And he's like, you look terrified. You'll be fine. Like, it's okay. And I was like, okay. And then, like, that's all it took, and it was fine. It was all good. The results of that day were wonderful. And it's that confidence that it was nice to have that encouragement. But, I probably could have done that. Like, nowadays, I do that to myself. I pump myself up because I just, those words of affirmation, you can give them to yourself, on the side, and that's where this confidence comes from.
But let's dive into the one that you talked at the beginning of our conversation here about choosing your battles. Was there a specific scenario that you that you think about when this point comes up, or when you read about this point?
Is singing cadence one of those battles you choose to lose?
One of those hills he'll die on.
Yeah, not on division run day. I mean, you know what? If no one jumped out to sing cadence, like, I would have kept doing it myself. But no, that's I always talk about. I think in the article there was I don't know if it was CQ or
it was CQ,
something, right?
CQ duty, yeah.
There's another one that came up recently about head count, KP duty, I think, in the chow hall. Mm-hmm. And I was just a bystander to it, but I literally said, hey, is this what you want to fight for, right? And it was to a first sergeant about, arguing whether or not they had to do that or not, and it's, if you think about it, there's no rank requirement for serving food in the chow hall, you can't tell me that there's not one person, that can go do that. I'll go do it. When I was the first sergeant of the first company at Fort Bliss, there was they used this the way they talked about things was building credit and cashing checks, right? And so by doing good things and you built credit, but then when bad things happened, then they were cashing checks, right? And so you didn't want to cash more checks than what you had credit for, something like that, right? And it's just one of those things where, like, doing something figuring out a way to do something you don't necessarily want to do as a leader, like, can you really do it? And if you can really do it, just do it. And that's going to build you some credit. Someone's going to remember that. And then, you can cash that in later, or you can not and just do it because you're a good person or whatever. You can be the person that's always relied upon. And sometimes that'll wear you out too. That has its own dangers. But, not everything is worth a fight, and not everything needs a devil's advocate. Not everything needs to be argued about. Sometimes you just need to get it done, especially when it's not something that is going to, definitely not life, limb, or eyesight, and doesn't affect the unit's mission, doesn't affect certain things. Then just let it be, and get it done, and realize that you got more power than what you have. If you count yourself as someone that does things, someone that works, that's an extra body that you have in your organization to get stuff done. So I think we lose some of that too. Once we get promoted, we start feeling like, we don't have hands anymore to do things. And so, that's just important to talk about. If you just get stuff done, you'll spend less time arguing. You're going to be done with it, probably whatever that task was, and it's not worth your mental frustration, I guess.
I think this one is directly tied to personal life. You're talking about balance earlier, and I think this is an important life lesson for soldiers in general, for people in general, that you need to choose your battles. So I think it directly translates into your personal life and establishing a good balance with your significant. With your personal life and work life, and your relationship with your significant other, and I think it's important that NCOs or that soldiers remember that, and, use that advice that you have here and the things that you're saying and that we're all talking about, and apply it to more than just being a soldier or being an NCO.
Yeah, definitely. One of my previous commanders, Chris Best is his name, and he's not in the Army anymore, but he found this article, and he called me, or he texted me, and he said that he works in the corporate world now, and it is, you say, it applies to your personal life, and he's basically sharing it with his corporate team, because he's like, it's not a military thing, like it totally applies to us here, in his setting as well. And so it's just one of those cool things, right, where it is Army specific, but it doesn't take much to kind of translate to how any one of these points, you can pick and choose your battles at home too, and is it worth it or not, or is it okay just to make your significant other feel better or whatever, that's what it is, right? If it's is the juice worth the squeeze?
Yeah, that's a great point. Let's. What about you, Captain Carmack? You want any? You want to contribute to this part of our point?
I tell you what, Lieutenant Carmack was down to die on every hill. I was. This was one of my biggest professional developments that I've gone through in the past, I'd say, year, honestly. And it stems from a previous commander I had, Captain Chapman. He's out there at USERPAC now, probably down the road from Sergeant Major Vowell. And he really I was down to, I'd become that lieutenant in my last unit that was so, I'd been there for a while. I was an XO for like 18 months, and I felt like I knew more than a lot of the newer, officers who were either coming out of Triple C, who were on staff telling, me what to do when I had been in the organization longer, and they just barely gotten there. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, you were a lieutenant like just a month ago, and now you're telling me what to do. And, it never ended well for me, because I was still a lieutenant at the end of the day. But at the same time, I think I got to the point where I didn't really realize, what they were trying to get me to do, because what the impacts of that of, because not only are you, if you're dying on every hill, you're not going to be there for the next battle. I think that's what I ultimately came to is, pick and choose your battles, because the battles that you need to win are the ones that you need to, the ones you need to recognize which ones you need to win and which ones are, not worth fighting.
Did you have something you wanted to add, Sergeant Cox?
No, I had a story earlier. I don't know if it's good for the podcast, but I'll mention it. So there was during your choose your battles, I was going to tell you a story. So we were on deployment, and there was an E7, and I've almost never said no to, like a direct order, like you need to go do this. But he came up to me. He was from maintenance platoon. I think we were working on, this is Apaches, so Romeo. And he came up to me and he said, "Hey, I need you to fix this tip cap on the main rotor blade." And I was like, "Well, what's wrong with it?" And they're like, "Well, it's dented." And then I go over there and I find out that they were ground guiding the Apache into the clamshell and hit the tip cap off of the side of the hangar. I was like, "Are you kidding me?" Right? And then my NCO comes over and he's like, "What happened?" He's like, "Yeah, they hit it off the hangar. I don't know." So they're like, "Yeah, we need you to fix it." But because we already have the phase bird in here, because we're already working on a phase bird, he's like, "Can you just fix it while it's still on the aircraft?" And I was like, "You know what? No, I can't." And I was like, because it's difficult, right, to be on a scissors jack trying to fix a tip cap, where you need leverage and stuff to try and get this thing off. You got to sand it and everything else. And I told him no, even though inside I knew I probably could. I haven't done it before, but I knew I could. And he fought me. So I went to PC and I said, "Hey, I can't do that." And technically in the book, it's a Romeo job. So I'm doing a favor for you guys. Well, that bit me in the ass, because later they did actually take the blade off. I fixed it. Took me, a couple hours. I gave it back to him. But that NCO, never came to us ever again. I almost completely ruined that connection between the maintenance platoon, one of the maintenance platoon sergeants in our shop.
Stubborn.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good story though, because it shows your confidence, and I have the exact identical story where I was driving the tug, and on a Blackhawk, and I was the one driving the tug, and one of the ground guides let the rotor blade smash into a Connex or something, and that happens often. I think almost anybody who's been in aviation for a while probably has a similar story. But I mean, it's one of those things where you weren't wrong, right? Like you weren't ethically wrong, legally wrong, morally wrong, And so if you lost a relationship, it's just because that guy had angst, Really. And today, if you were to find that person today, you'd probably laugh about it, and they probably admit to it, like they're just being, what's the word I'm looking for? Like childish, or petty, because we know it's not right to cut corners in Army aviation or anywhere really. I mean, there's a time and place, but they trusted you to do a job, and you went to production control and you said, hey, this is where I stand on this, and and they agreed with you, and so it's that probably molded you, and you remembered that story, and you've probably told it before, and if you were and you're a sheet metal guy, sheet metal mechanic, and so if you were to go to the next, sheet metal, 15 Gulf AIT graduation and be the speaker, you could probably tell that story where you had empathy, to them and say, you're going to have situations like this and you're going to have to choose, can I get it done, for the better. It wasn't, if you said yes to him, it wasn't for him. It was for the unit, right. Because, it is, you need the aircraft back. But if he would have acted in a different way, you might have said yes.
Yeah. Because, I mean, he came to us like with a rush. Like, hey, yeah, this got screwed up, but it's got to fly. Like, we got to go. And it's like, okay, well.
And they listened to you. And what if he would have showed up with a case of rivets? Probably.
That's different. Yeah, I used to get paid in Red Bulls to fix stuff all the time. Hey, man, I stepped on this panel. My bad. Here's a Red Bull.
Yeah. Sometimes that's the way things get done, man. Hey.
No, that's a great point. That's a great way of putting it, too. I like that the use of that analogy there. Time management versus people management. What are your thoughts on that section there where we're talking about time management versus people management?
I think if we manage our personnel correctly, a lot of times you'll find you'll have a lot more time on your hands for things that are more important. I think if you're managing your systems and processes the way they're supposed to be managed, and not micromanaging, but giving clear guidance and direction, especially from the officer perspective to your NCOs. If you're giving clear guidance to those people, and hey, you're a junior NCO giving clear guidance to a soldier, and then sometimes everybody needs to a little bit of shut up and color, but at the same time, and giving them that why helps them, like we talked about before, helps them buy in, helps them be committed versus compliant, right? And I think ultimately how we manage our personnel affects our everyday life, because it affects our overall time management, right? So if we're sitting there, doing things that we expect, doing things personally that we would expect, our subordinates to be doing, and not managing them correctly, ultimately impacts, yourself, and you'll be at work later, and impacts your family life, and a lot of these end up bleeding into each other that we talked about before. So I think people management is a huge skill that you do not ever really master. I think you can always continue to progress in people management.
Yeah, one of the things that I think senior leaders should take an opportunity to do, and that's kind of impart this information to their junior NCOs or soldiers, especially those that with combat experience, is that they have to kind of. I like painting the picture and saying that in combat, you're going to feel this, right? Shortage of personnel and equipment, time. You're going to experience a lot of these things, and so it's better that you learn how to deal with them now when you're in a garrison environment, when you're in training, than trying to learn that skill or those scoping skills, or how to do more with less when your life depends on it, when the life of your peers depend on it. And so I think that's one of the biggest things that we can do as senior NCOs, is kind of let's put that in that perspective of we're a combat, right? Like we're an army that fights and wins wars. Keep that in mind when you're bringing up these questions of, I don't have enough people, I don't have enough equipment to do this or that.
There's never enough.
There never will be. Yeah.
But we always make it work.
Yeah.
So
that's the important thing. That's the important thing to remember. We always make it work, and you can either do it with a smile on your face, knowing it, or just complaining the whole time. You'll feel a lot better if you just commit to it.
All right, so let's dive into number 10, which we're at the tail end here, but nobody likes a know-it-all. I just like that. It's like nobody likes to know it all. Tell us about that, Sergeant Major.
Yeah, it's just, I don't know. I've had seniors to me, that you find out some new information, whatever it is, and you're excited about it because it's new to you. It probably affects the mission or affects the unit or affects someone's life, whatever. You basically run over to tell them, and this has happened to me from being a private all the way to being a command sergeant major. And, hey, this thing just happened. Here's this info. And the very first thing out of their mouth is, oh, I know that already. And it's just deflating. It's like, oh, well, why did I even waste time talking to you? And what are you going to do about it then? Like that's back in the day, I would just kind of eat it and be like, well, wow, I guess that person gets information faster than me. But now I've kind of, have some angst about it because it's like, well, if you knew about it, why didn't you take action? And especially if it's something that was actionable. And, out of all the different types of power, he talks about it in Army doctrine, but information power is a real power. And nobody should hold on to it. And so, and some folks, that's all they got, that's all they have is information power. And it's okay to let them have it. Doesn't mean they're in charge or they're the commander, but it's okay to learn. And so it's just something that I don't feel like and maybe I have done that to people before. I hope I haven't. But now when I ask people questions or they come to tell me information, if it's something I know already, I just take it. And I'm glad to know about it. And the only time I ever really kind of admit that I knew it already is if what they're telling me is incorrect, And I don't really say like, hey, you're wrong. It's more of like, well, you know what, to add to what you said, like I learned this thing too, And that way you're not completely, dismissing what they're saying. I think it goes back to the uncrossing your arms and get your hands off your hips conversation as well. When you just shut someone down, you're like, yeah, I know that. You're just becoming unapproachable, What do you think, Captain Carmack?
Yeah, I'd say if we're looking at people who think they're know-it-alls, Sergeant Major's the one who knows it all. No, I'm kidding. Sergeant Major, honestly, he came into when he was here. He got here a couple months before I did, and I think admitting that you don't know it all, first and foremost, I think is the first step, and it makes you more. And I think it makes you a lot more approachable as well. I don't know how many times I heard Sergeant Major Vowell mention, in the shop, I'm the SPO Sergeant Major. I don't know anything about the SPO, and I'm just a Black Hawk mechanic, but I'm gonna learn and make myself better. And a lot of times I think we see senior, NCOs or officers or whoever, we see the rank on their chest, or we see all these accomplishments, and maybe they don't know it all, right? So how can you, as the junior NCO, not necessarily, I don't think maybe not necessarily educate them, because I don't think that's the correct way of phrasing it, but how can you help them understand so that you can better the organization? I think if we all take a step back and admit that we don't know it all, and say, hey, how does this affect you? And hey, this is how it affects me. Let's continue to go down that path. But I think along with Sergeant Major's point of someone coming up to you. I remember being in the talk. I was in the talk one time, and I came back from a sync that I had, and I told my commander something, and He's like, yeah, I know. Because he had, just got briefed something very similar. And, you walk in and it's very deflating. It really is, because you walk in and, someone says, yeah, I already know that. So it kind of deflates it deflates you a little bit, and you're like, okay, what's my purpose then? You're coming back, you're excited to give information. You're doing that thing where, you're giving feedback and bottom up refinement, and you're trying to, I think it goes back to, what was it? The one we had earlier, we were talking about following up. You come back to follow up about something important some information that you got, and, you just kind of get shot down. You don't want that feeling. So if you don't like that feeling, I don't think it's important that you don't give that feeling to your subordinates as well, because they're fired up about that information. Be like, hey, that's awesome. They told me the same thing. We're on the same page. Let's get after it.
That kind of leads to one of the things that Sergeant Major said when you were talking to Sergeant Major about your intro, when you introduced yourself, where you said you don't know a lot of, you don't know some things here about the new unit that you checked into, and you're asking questions. How easy would it be for Sergeant Major to Command Sergeant Major to walk in and everybody's going to assume that he knows it all, but he doesn't. And if he acts that way, then you may be look foolish later on at some point because of things that you assume or whatever. So I think it's important that not only that people don't like know-it-alls, but don't act like a know-it-all. If you don't know something, I don't think there's anything wrong with asking questions and learning. That's again, you're setting an example as well. Sergeant Major, you walk in there, you start asking questions. They know that, okay, first of all, he's curious. Second of all, he wants to know what we're doing here, and third, he's not afraid to ask for help. And I think that's important that you demonstrate. The fact that you're doing that demonstrates, I think, that it's okay for them to do the same thing.
I mean, I don't know if that's the most important thing on this list. They all tie together, like we've mentioned that more than once. But I want soldiers to be, confident and empowered and all that, and don't want to take anything away from them and give them opportunities, because they got to take my spot. I need, the Army, not me, the Army needs specialists to become sergeants and staff sergeants, and some of those folks will go be warrant officers, and some will become sergeant first classes, and some will become commissioned officers. And there's so many, points where you can apply influence on someone's, development throughout their career. That how many people got out of the Army because someone didn't let them tell a story about something they learned, or someone shut them down. And, information power is great, but it's just let them say it. It's later today. I'm gonna have a meeting with one of the troops, and we have a thing in the aviation called the Aviation Maintenance Training Program, or AMTP. And I've read the doctrine, the .71, and I know what it is. I've never personally been in charge of it because I've been doing different jobs, and I haven't had mechanic. I haven't been a first line supervisor of a mechanic for quite a while, but I know what it is. But my conversation with that sergeant first class, he manages the program in the squadron. It's literally going to be, hey man, like, teach me how you do this, teach me how you manage this. And that's a way to show them that, like, I know what the doctrine says, but I don't know his program, because, there's an art and a science to everything. And so, the science is the doctrine, this is what we expect. And then the art is how that sergeant first class applies it. And not everybody knows the art, and that's an obvious thing. And so just be open to it, and don't ever shut anybody down just because you know something that they're excited to tell you. The deflating is probably the best word. You want to keep people in the Army, make them want to be here,
Thank you for joining us, gentlemen. And thank you to our audience. Remember to put your knowledge to the page, submit articles, and get published with the NCO Journal. Don't forget to check out our webpage and follow us on social media. We'll catch you next time on the NCO Journal Podcast.